Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been up to on my own allotment and my own kitchen garden here in Littlehampton on the south coast of the UK. I've been growing my own for over 30 years, but I still learn something new every single day. Now this week, of course, the storm has hit the UK and I genuinely hope you haven't suffered any damage. But it has made gardening a little bit tricky, but we've still managed to get out and do a few things. Out in the kitchen garden, I've been tackling the removal of an elm tree as well as looking at my rhubarb. Getting down to the allotment was a little bit tricky, but we've taken our rhubarb down there. And then back in the podding shed, I want to share with you an experience I've had of joining our local community garden on a pruning day. So that's all coming up this week. Firstly, let's head on out to the kitchen garden and hear what's been going on there. Well, here I am in the kitchen garden. Now the wind has just started picking up. It's been a bit windy all day, to be honest, but it really has picked up in the last few minutes. I have been out in my kitchen garden for quite a few hours now. We came out into the garden this morning, me and my wife, because we had a task that we wanted to tackle today. It's a task that we've put off for a while, and it was to tackle the elm tree that I have growing in my border just to the side of my greenhouse. Now this elm tree, it appeared a few years ago. I remember seeing it as a little long shoot that I meant to cut down while it was still young, and I never ever did. Now that tree is 4.5 metres tall with some very, very thick branches, probably good 40 centimetre diameter. It is very, very thick. And of course it gets heavy, and because it's grown right on the border, it's lifting up the paths and causing damage to the fence as well. So it needs to go. It needs to go. It also means when this tree is gone, I can then start moving forward and running electric cables like I want to do. So my wife and I, we came out this morning to make a start on cutting down this tree, and we sort of gathered our tools together. I couldn't find my favourite pair of loppers, but we found some loppers and we started cutting off some of the branches that we could reach with the loppers. The trouble is, because this tree is so tall, we needed ladders, and out came the ladders, but because it was windy, neither of us felt very safe on top of the ladders. I have to admit, I have a fear of heights. I don't do very well with heights, so I can be extra cautious working off ladders. Anyway, we got as far as we could with the loppers, but there was still a lot that we needed to do. We stood back and were looking at it and thinking to ourselves, what can we do? How can we make this work? And we thought about just taking the whole tree down in one go by chopping off at the base, but we were worried because the tree is big and heavy, it's going to cause some damage, especially if it doesn't land in the way that we don't want it to. Now I've got to admit, when it comes to tree surgery, I have done a little bit. I took a sycamore tree down in our garden a few years ago. I consider myself to be, well, fairly okay with tree surgery, but I'm certainly no professional. But if I didn't feel confident enough, then I think it wasn't worth doing. So instead what we did is I have a pole saw, which is basically a chainsaw on the end of a pole, and fully extended that could reach quite a few of the branches. So we got that out and we started cutting some of the branches. Now what quickly became apparent is that some of these branches as they came down were a lot heavier than we were expecting, So in hindsight, it was probably a good idea that we cut it off in small goes. In fact, some of these branches landed on top of the greenhouse, and this was always my fear. Luckily, it didn't cause any damage to the greenhouse, but it could have done. However, we got halfway through one of the branches and a flame came out of the motor and it stopped working. The chainsaw was dead. So we had to stop what we were doing. And this gave us concern because this branch was quite a thick branch and we had cut halfway through it. So me and Amanda were sort of, how do we get it down? We don't want to leave it like that, because if it comes down and one of us is underneath it, or Roxy, it's going to hurt. Well, we're trying to figure it out, and then the wind blew and it came crashing down, made a huge amount of noise. Luckily, again, nothing was damaged and nobody was hurt, but it was down. Unfortunately, we couldn't go any further. We've ordered some new tools in order to try and get the rest of it down, but it means we're not as far as I would have liked. I would have liked to get the tree completely down in order to start running electrics out to my shed, but there's still time. We can still, when we get our new tools, we can do it. Now, ideally, I would have actually got a professional in to cut this tree down, but we struggled to find anybody that was interested in the job. So not an option there, I'm afraid. We have to do it ourselves. Now, because we couldn't go any further with the elm tree, I decided to tidy up and then dig up my rhubarb. Now, rhubarb, every 5 years, it's well worth digging up your rhubarb crowns and splitting them. Basically, taking a sharp spade and cutting the root into 3 pieces, the 2 outer ends and the middle. You can then replant those 3 pieces. Often you find the middle piece is a bit woody, but you can replant the 3 pieces as long as they got buds on them, and they will regrow, giving you more rhubarb plants. This also avoids rhubarb getting a bit too congested. Sometimes you find after about 5 years that rhubarb doesn't produce as much, and that's because it's often just too congested for the area it is in. So it's well worth digging it up every 5 years and splitting it. Well, I dug my rhubarb up and I've split it into 10 pieces from 2 plants. So I got quite a few bits of rhubarb crowns. I've actually put those in pots because my rhubarb isn't going to be growing where I had it growing. Originally, my rhubarb that I planted 10 years ago now, one of the plants I actually inherited when we moved into this house, I had it growing in front of my greenhouse in the rhubarb bed. It was quite a nice area for it to grow, actually, and it's done well for the years, but I want the area now to be our cold frame area for my cold frames. Just trying to keep everything in place for propagation and growing on. So I've dug up the rhubarb. I've split it and put it into pots. We're going to find places for it, probably down on the allotment, to be honest. It's going to be a lot of rhubarb, don't get me wrong. I'm not sure we're going to need all these crowns, so I might have to find a way of doing something with the rest. But I then, in that area where the rhubarb was, the soil was really good actually, really good for clay soil as well. Really nice and friable because of all the compost I've been adding over the years. But I've placed over that bed some paving slabs and I've placed my cold frame on top, and that area, it does look pretty good. I've got to say, I am quite happy with what we've done there and very, very pleased to see it continue. Now, at the moment, because we've got to continue taking this elm tree down, I can't do much with this area until it is down. But it's progress nonetheless. We'll wait and see what happens with our new tools. Well, I'm going to take this rhubarb down to the allotment. So if you'd like to join me down the allotment in just a moment, I'll tell you what we've been doing down there. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, it's that part of the show where I ask you if you could be good enough to leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. It helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning more and looking for inspiration on how to grow their own food. It costs you absolutely nothing to do that. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us out. Not only that, if you are also enjoying this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. Added to that, once a month, you will receive through the letterbox our monthly seed pack, and that seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I have carefully chosen to be sown in that very week. And included with the seeds is a copy of our mini newspaper. Now, our mini newspaper gives you a bit of instructions on how to sow those seeds, but I've also made it into a tool that you could use, a way of planning and keeping notes of what's going on in your allotment, your kitchen garden, throughout the very month. I've been using it myself and it's becoming quite a useful tool. But as an example, the seeds that we've sown over the last week have included chives, which is of course our seed of the month, and then we have sown some cardoons, closely related to globe artichokes, and are quite an architectural but edible plant. Now, once again, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to theveggrowpodcast.co.uk to find out more and hopefully sign up. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm down on the allotment now. I've had to run inside the greenhouse to record this piece. The wind has got worse, and worse than that, the rain has come down as well. It's quite heavy rain. But that didn't stop us from getting on with what I wanted to do down on the allotment. Now, it is a bit of a quiet time on the allotment. It is quite empty. I still try and visit the allotment as much as I possibly can, just to keep on top of general maintenance, to keep everything ticking over. We're on top of our pruning. We're tackling the problem areas, all the things that I've been talking about over the last few weeks. There's just very little that we can actually do. Listen to that wind. There's just very little that we can actually do until probably March. We'll keep trying though. It's still well worth going down the allotment, because the thing I like to think about is that winter is perfect for doing structural jobs. While we have plenty of time, plenty of quiet time, we can tackle some of those big structural jobs, be it putting in paths, building beds, sheds, etc., should that be a case. We don't have any of those jobs to do, but I am tackling some of those problems areas, and it's making a big difference. Now, what I've also done is, of course, I have brought down the pots of the rhubarb crowns that I've spoke of from home that have been separated. And that has meant we have got lots of rhubarb growing down on the allotment. Now, we're keeping these in the pots down on the allotment, I've decided. Quite large pots at that, but I'm just going to keep them in these pots while I decide what we're going to do with them. It's just freeing up more space at home than anything. But I'm in two minds about whether to keep them or not, but for now, we've just got them down here for safekeeping. One of the things that I wanted to do on the allotment, however, is something that I do try to do every now and then, is force some existing rhubarb. Now, I've got several rhubarb plants growing down on the allotment as well. And what I like to do is force the odd rhubarb crown. And forcing is simply just covering over a rhubarb crown in order to force it into some early growth. And forced rhubarb is usually sweeter, pinker, and quite interesting, just adds a different dimension to our rhubarb. Now, there are terracotta rhubarb forcers that we can buy from a garden centre, but I think they're quite expensive. They look pretty, but they can be quite expensive. Instead, what I like to use, pretty simply, is a dustbin or even a compost bin. And I just simply place it over my rhubarb. And what that does is it excludes any light. This forces the rhubarb to grow really long but very, very pale. As I said, it becomes a pinker, sweeter rhubarb, which makes it rather nice, I think. Now, this means that once we have finished harvesting our forced rhubarb, that rhubarb we have to leave for the rest of the year. By about March, April, I find that we stop harvesting our forced rhubarb, but for the rest of the year, we cannot harvest from this crown. So we have to make sure that it's definitely something that we want to do. It's definitely something that I'm doing to make it all the more worthwhile. Now, one of the other things that I think it's important to mention, rhubarb is so easy to sow from seed. I've spoken a lot about rhubarb because something I do like to do every single year as well is grow rhubarb from seed. Now, this sounds completely ridiculous. why do I need so much rhubarb? But actually, I really enjoy growing rhubarb from seed. The seeds are quite large. You simply pop them into a load of compost and they germinate really easily. I do give them a bit of heat in my heated propagators, but they germinate really, really quickly. And once they're up and growing, they're just so easy to continue. And with the right varieties, you can actually harvest rhubarb within 1 year of sowing. Personally, I like to wait to the second year, but it is just so easy. So easy and much cheaper. You head to Premier Seeds Direct, for example, and you can buy a pack of, I think it's about 10 seeds for £1.29, something like that. Prices might be different, but there'll be a link on the show notes if you are interested in that. But honestly, I cannot believe how easy it is to grow rhubarb from seed. I think I did Seed of the Month last year as rhubarb because it is just so easy. Now, again, we spoke last week that many people are probably itching to sow seeds, but I do believe it's too early to sow most seeds. If you do have heated propagators, then rhubarb is a seed you might want to give it a try. Anyway, as I said, I'm here on the allotment. The weather is not looking like it's going to get any better, so I'm going to cut today's visit to the allotment a little bit short and head on home. I'm going to meet you back in the potting shed because I've got an experience that I've done over this weekend that I want to share with you. But in the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Well, this week's recipe is already on the website and it's a good one. We ate this over the weekend and it was absolutely delicious. I've got baked eggs with leeks and herbs. Now, at the moment, we have lots of eggs. Our chickens are laying like mad. We also have lots of leeks. It's certainly the season for leeks. So these two combined together are absolutely fantastic. So first of all, we preheated the oven to gas mark 6, 180 degrees C. And while that was preheating, I sliced one leek and then I just gently cooked that on the hob on the top of the oven with a bit of butter for about 8 to 10 minutes, just on a low heat until the leeks were nice and soft. Then I added in 1 clove of garlic, which I've crushed, and cooked that for about another 30 seconds and then removed the heat. Then I took those leeks and garlic and I put them in a small oven-proof dish. Or ramekins could work as well. But I basically then just made some small wells amongst the leek and the garlic, cracked in some eggs. I used 4 eggs, seasoned with a bit of salt and pepper and added a splash of cream as well. And then I just baked those for 10 to 15 minutes until all the whites were set, but the yolks are nice and soft. And this is absolutely delicious. Really great with some nice crusty bread. It's a great little lunch or even a dinner. And even if you could add some cheese or anything like that to add a bit more flavour to it as well. Absolutely delicious, I've got to say. Really easy as well. Go give it a try. On that note, I just want to say, Jan, she shared a recipe, an adaptation from last week's recipe in our Facebook group. And thank you very much for that. It was absolutely lovely as well. If you've got any adaptations to these recipes, please do share them with us as well. Now, of course, over the weekend, we did have some rather nasty weather, and I hope you have all survived the storm and you haven't had any damage. But I did have an extra experience over the weekend that I wanted to share with you. Last week, I received an email inviting me to take part in a pruning session that goes on at our local community orchard. Now, I have taken you to the community orchard as part of our tour of our community gardens here in Littlehampton about 18 months ago, and it's a really fascinating event. It's changed a lot in that 18 months, but I have got involved in this whole community growing project a little bit more. I've been doing bits and pieces, and I'm really finding it rather enjoyable. We've set up community gardens, we've set up community allotments, and we have this community orchard, which I've known about for years. We visit quite often walking the dog. Great way to get apples and pears and you name it, there's those fruits growing there, and we can all pick them for free. It's a great thing to have. But it does need volunteers to maintain and get involved for it to survive. And one of the things, of course, that needs to happen is pruning. Now, I went along to take part and see how it was working out. And I've got to say, it was a lot of fun. But I also came away with a sudden realisation that, yes, it was a community event. We were working together. But for people who don't have access to a garden, or perhaps want a bit more education or training on pruning in particular, which can be quite scary, this was for me a great way to get some training, or that's what I thought of it. I'm reasonably confident with pruning these days, but it is something that can be quite nerve-wracking. Anyway, I turned up at 10 o'clock and I signed in as we had to do, a bit of health and safety and that usual stuff that goes on. But the first thing that was done was an instruction on how to prune. A young lady stood up and told us how we are to prune these apples and pears we were concentrating on, quite rightly. Now, I have to admit, I didn't need anything from this education, but having conversations with some of the people that were there, they didn't know what they were doing, so they found that training to be quite useful. And as we went throughout the couple of hours that we spent on this pruning course, they were obviously running around and offering advice at the same time. So if you are, this is what I want to get across, if you are unconfident with pruning, then please do go to a local community orchard, get involved on a pruning day and get some free advice and free training. Now, after the training, we were all told to go and find a tree and make a start on pruning. I had one that I had already eyed up. I already thought that's the tree I want to concentrate on. And the reason I wanted that tree, it was right at the front, but it had never been pruned since it had been planted probably 12 years ago. It was heavily congested, a lot of branches all over the place. It just needed a lot of attention. I knew it was going to be hard work. I'm not the type to shirk away from hard work. That for me was the tree that I wanted. Now, I was also joined by Sarah on this very tree as well, which was probably good because it was definitely a two-person job. But Sarah, she'd just moved into her first house with a garden. She did have some fruit trees in her garden, but she was very unsure about pruning and had never pruned before. So she had no confidence and she wanted to work alongside me because obviously I was quite confident. I knew what I was doing. I took her under my wing, if you like. So we went to work on this tree together. First of all, we started out by just removing the 3 Ds. That's the dead, diseased and damaged branches. Now, this wasn't actually mentioned in the training, but for me, this is how I always start any of my pruning. If I'm looking for anything, I want to remove any dead branches, any diseased branches, and any damaged branches. That way, it all gets tidied up, infections are removed, and it just looks a lot tidier. Now, this was where we started. It was a good place to start, and there was a lot of damaged branches on this particular tree, which we were cutting away and removing. Interestingly, the more we cut away, the more damaged branches we found, which was quite interesting because we couldn't see them on our first inspection. But as we got into it, we just kept finding more and more. Now, this is often the case where branches have snapped in the wind and the branches have fallen off or may even still be hanging there. We even had an infection in one rather large branch that we had to cut away. Now, this was a large branch with another large branch coming off it, and the branch coming off it had snapped right on the knuckle, right on that joint, and an infection had got in there. And we could see it when we cut away at the wood, when the infection had really got into the wood really quite deep. So that was a good start. And as we removed all this dead, diseased and damaged, we stood back and the tree was starting to look better. Now, the instructor did come along at certain points and just offer a bit of advice. One of the things that she said with the tree that we were working on is that we couldn't go far wrong because it was in such a bad condition, in such a need for pruning. We very much were in revitalising pruning, where we're just trying to bring it back to a good state. Now, after we'd removed the 3Ds, dead, diseased and damaged branches, we were then looking at any crossed branches or any branches that are going to cross. This is again where I usually start with my pruning. And that is because when they cross, there's a good chance that they could rub. And if they rub, that's a place for infection. So we were removing some of those branches. We're trying to leave the branches that were in the best condition when we came to pruning one or the other. And it's a lot of conversation that we were having and standing back and looking, but we got there. And at this point, we were at an hour in. We've been on this tree for an hour. We stood back, we looked at it, and we could really see the difference that we had made. Now, at this point, the organisers had arranged for a wassailing break, which basically was, we were given cider or apple juice, depending on what we wanted. There was some toast put in a tree and some songs sang. Not really my sort of thing, but it's a very sort of earthy thing to do, knocking on the wood to wake up the apples and things like that. As I said, not my usual sort of thing at all, but it was part of what I wanted to do, and we then had to take part. Anyway, after about 10 minutes of this, it was then back to the tree. And at this point now, because we had removed the crossing branches, we had removed the dead and diseased and damaged branches, we were now then focusing on trying to make the tree have enough ventilation. Now, this was something that was mentioned in the training. The old philosophy was that the gardener could stand and throw his hat through the tree, and that meant it was pruned enough. But the example that was given by the instructor was that a bird to be able to fly through the tree without hitting any branches. And that was certainly what we were aiming for. Certainly in the centre, we were moving a lot of branches to open it up. And water shoots as well. Water shoots are vertical stems that grow on the branches. We needed to remove quite a few of those. Anyway, after 2 hours working on this tree, we came away. The tree looked so much better for it. It's just a shame we could only concentrate on that one tree. There was about 20 people involved, I would say, and we got about half of the trees done in that time. I do think we need to do some more pruning events. But my real takeaway from it, and I say this as somebody who I like to encourage people, I like to give people education on how to prune or how to take care of the vegetable garden. For me, this was a great way. If you do want to get some instruction on pruning, it was a great way to get free instruction, build your confidence, especially if you don't have a garden or fruit trees of your own, but you want to one day get involved in a local community garden. It's more than just a community. It really, really is. I really enjoyed my day though. I did really enjoy my day. It was great to take part in this. And now whenever I visit that community orchard, I'm going to look at it in a different light. Now I am trying to take part in community gardening a lot more because I do feel it's something that is very important to me. I want people to be able to feed themselves, ideally in their garden or in their allotment. But if they haven't got any of these options, then a community garden might be the next best thing. Now, if you are taking part in any community gardening, then please do let me know of your experience. I'd love to hear your experiences on community gardening projects. I know a few of you are involved. Let's talk about it more. Let's find out what's going on. Well, we're coming to the end of this week's podcast. And as always, I ask you at this point, once again, to please rate and review, because rate and review really, really helps us out in a big way. We have had a rate and review come in from PMaxim194 on Podbean, and he says, great podcast, really helpful and insightful. The Supporters Club is such a great idea too. Well, thank you very much for that really positive feedback. I absolutely love getting any feedback, and it really does help. Also, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club, as mentioned earlier. Details on that at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. If you want to get in touch, you can of course email me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can leave a voicemail on our website. Just simply head to theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk and click on the voicemail link. And of course, you can find me on social media. Just search for the Veg Grower Podcast. Well, that will be it for this week. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.